How do you feel? Have you had time to reflect on everything yet? I stood there face to face with my husband, the man who had thrown me out of the house after blindly believing his stepchild's lies. He wore an air of superiority, looking down on me as if he knew everything. I couldn't help but laugh. Reflect? No, not at all, I said calmly, pulling a stack of papers from my bag. Now please sign here. I handed him the divorce papers and legal documents my lawyer had prepared. He maintained his calm demeanor as he took the papers, signing them without protest, until he saw the attached documents. His expression froze, his hand trembling slightly. Beside him, his stepchild Jim began to panic. The lies they had so carefully constructed had been exposed, and the truth lay bare. Let me backtrack a bit. My name is Mary. I'm a 52-year-old office worker who had been married for just a year. I lived with my husband Brian and his adult son Jim, who worked full-time but refused to leave the house he'd grown up in. I never adopted Jim, so to me he was little more than a stranger. From the beginning I had hoped he would move out, but Jim dug in his heels. This is my mother's house, he declared firmly. She died 5 years ago and I won't leave the home I shared with her. I sympathized, having lost my first husband around the same time Jim's mother passed. But sympathy didn't make his defiance any easier to live with. My mom was a better cook, but I guess I'll eat this, Jim muttered one evening, picking at the meal I prepared with disdain. He didn't bother hiding his contempt, and it wore me down. If my cooking was so unbearable, why didn't he make his own meals? Frustrated, I turned to Brian. Jim clearly doesn't like my cooking. What should I do? My husband shrugged. Then stop cooking for him. He doesn't have to eat it. His indifference stung, but I followed his advice. The next time Jim came home to no dinner, he exploded. Why isn't there food for me? You married my dad, so it's your job to make my meals too, right? No matter what I did, I couldn't win. Jim's comments grew nastier, and Brian's refusal to intervene left me feeling isolated. Before we married, Brian had assured me that Jim would move out soon. Yet here we were, and Jim showed no signs of leaving. He just can't afford to live on his own, Brian claimed. But I knew better. Jim had inherited a substantial estate from his late mother and squandered much of it on luxury items. Credit card collection notices piled up in his room, evidence of his reckless spending. Jim wasn't just careless with money, he was dismissive of me. And Brian's passivity only enabled him. I confided in my daughter Emma. Maybe Jim just loves living at home, she suggested. But if I were him, I'd never impose on newlyweds like this. Her words gave me clarity. I had spent too long tolerating the intolerable. It was time to take control of my life again. Not long after, Emma shared exciting news. I got proposed to. Hearing her announcement, I couldn't help but smile. Since my remarriage, good news had been scarce, so this was a rare moment of joy. Congratulations, I exclaimed warmly. I'm sure your father in heaven is smiling too. Memories of my late husband flooded back. He had worried about our daughter's future until his final moments, and I felt certain he would have been relieved to see her find happiness. I'll introduce my fiancé to you soon, Emma said, then hesitated. But, do I have to introduce him to Brian? He's just your second husband. He has nothing to do with me. Her discomfort was clear, and I couldn't blame her. Just greet him briefly, I urged, hoping to ease her unease. Unlike Jim, Emma didn't live with us, nor had she been adopted by Brian. She knew about him only from what I had vented to her. When I told Brian about Emma's engagement, he barely reacted. His indifference stung, but I wasn't surprised. He'd never shown much interest in Emma. Later, Jim made a snide remark. Why don't you just divorce Dad and live with your daughter? You probably hate living with us anyway. Shocked, I looked to Brian for support. But as usual, he walked out of the room without a word. Don't you have someone special in your life? I snapped at Jim. Why don't you get married and give your father and mother some peace of mind? He scowled, irritated, and walked away. The thought crossed my mind. What if Jim got married and decided to live here with his wife? The idea filled me with dread. Do you think Jim will want to stay here after getting married? I asked Brian. Just leave it to Jim. I don't care either way, he replied dismissively. His indifference was infuriating. Eventually, I met Emma's fiancé. Before the meeting, I asked Brian if he wanted to come along. Predictably, he refused. I don't care about that. You don't need to invite me to the wedding either, he said flatly. Though disappointed, I ignored him and went alone. Emma's fiancé turned out to be a wonderful person, mature, reliable, and kind. He was about Jim's age but carried himself with far more grace and responsibility. "You've found yourself a great man," I told Emma, relieved. "When I remarried Brian, I thought I had found someone dependable too. How wrong I had been." Emma's fiancé lived alone, handled all his chores, and managed his life responsibly. Compared to Jim, who refused to lift a finger, he seemed like a dream. I started to worry about the future. Brian and I were still healthy, but would Jim take care of either of us in old age? I doubted it. Emma noticed my expression. "What's wrong? Are you unhappy about the wedding?" she teased lightly. I shared my concerns about Jim. Her fiancé, overhearing, smiled reassuringly. "I've heard about Jim from Emma. Don't worry, we'll take good care of you. If things don't work out with your husband and his son, you can always come live with us." His kindness brought me a sense of relief I hadn't felt in years. When I returned home late that night, Jim greeted me with his usual disdain. "A housekeeper shouldn't be late. Dad and I are starving." Hearing him call me a housekeeper stung, but Brian pretended not to hear. Compared to Emma's mature fiancé, Brian and Jim seemed even more pathetic. I wanted to snap back, "If you're hungry, cook for yourselves," but I bit my tongue and prepared dinner silently. Lately, Brian had been spending weekends out of the house, leaving me alone with Jim. While I preferred solitude over Jim's company, it made me question the purpose of our marriage. We had promised to spend our lives together, yet he was off doing whatever he wanted. "Where do you go every weekend?" I asked one day. "Take me with you sometime." "I'm not going out for fun," he said, looking troubled. "A friend's mother is in the hospital, so I'm helping out every weekend." Suspicious, I pressed him. "Is this friend you're helping a woman? Is this friend you're helping a woman?" I asked bluntly. Brian panicked, hastily denying it, but his flustered reaction only deepened my doubts. From that point on, he continued spending weekends away, and our relationship deteriorated further. Noticing the growing tension, Jim seemed delighted. He smirked as he approached me. "Dad probably regrets marrying an old lady like you. Maybe he wishes he'd married someone younger. You're going to get cheated on and kicked out. Poor thing." I was furious at his spiteful words. But given Brian's recent behavior, I couldn't help but wonder if there was some truth to them. Jim didn't seem to know anything concrete, he was just saying it to hurt me. "Why don't you just give up on Dad and leave before things get messy?" Jim added with a smug grin. His remark pushed me to realize that I needed to investigate Brian's actions. But first I snapped back. "If I leave, who's going to cook and clean for you? You don't do any housework, do you?" Jim glared at me and stormed off. If I left, I knew Jim would struggle. Brian had handled everything before I moved in, but the house had been a mess. Meals came from supermarkets and cleaning was non-existent. If I left, it would likely return to that state, or worse. A darker thought crept in. Did Brian intend to replace me with his mistress? Just as I was sinking deeper into my thoughts, my phone rang. It was Emma. "Mom, I need to talk to you." "Can you come over?" she asked, her voice serious. Worried, I hurried to her place. Her fiancé Jack was there as well. "What's the matter?" "Don't tell me you're calling off the wedding," I said anxiously. They exchanged awkward smiles. "Why would we cancel the wedding?" "This is about you, not us," Emma said. Relieved, I was caught off guard by their next revelation. Jack showed me his phone. "Is this your husband, Brian?" I didn't recognize him at first, but then I noticed the young woman next to him calling him by name. After examining the photo closely, I realized it was indeed Brian, wearing clothes I had seen before. The photo was taken at a wedding venue, and they were discussing their own wedding plans. I was speechless. Brian had no children other than Jim, so the young woman couldn't be his daughter. It was unthinkable that he was planning to marry someone else while still married to me. "That woman looks far too young to be Jim's girlfriend, doesn't she?" Emma asked. I recalled Brian's suspicious behavior and admitted, I suspected he might be cheating, but I never imagined he'd be with someone so young. Emma and Jack were stunned as I told them everything. Brian's evasiveness, his frequent absences, and my growing suspicions. "Your husband is awful. We need to properly investigate and make sure he takes responsibility," Jack said firmly. "You need to divorce him immediately, Mom," Emma added. I agreed, but I knew we needed evidence first. Jack began searching for private investigators. Don't worry about your future, Mom. You can come live with us, he reassured me. Feeling supported for the first time in years, I returned home with newfound determination. Jim greeted me in his usual manner. Hurry up and make dinner. Housekeepers shouldn't be out so late, he sneered. His attitude irritated me, but I silently prepared dinner. I was determined not to let him see me struggle. Once I had proof of Brian's affair, I would leave. If Brian remarried, Jim would have to rely on his new stepmother, and I doubted he'd dare treat her the way he treated me. When Brian came home, I decided to test him. Will you be attending our daughter's wedding? They're having it at a prestigious venue, I said casually, naming the very place from the photo. Brian's face stiffened for a split second before he denied knowing the venue. His reaction confirmed my suspicions, but I chose not to press further. Yet. Then he abruptly changed the subject. Jim hasn't asked you for money, has he? He's been struggling financially lately. I shook my head. Jim had never asked me for money. He didn't see me as anything more than a housekeeper. He's been pestering me, Brian continued. Despite inheriting a large sum from his mother, he blew through it all. Now he's begging me for help. I thought about the debt collection notices I had found while cleaning Jim's room but didn't mention them. I couldn't bring myself to confide in a man who was likely cheating on me. Besides, I feared Jim's reaction if he found out I had seen them. I haven't heard anything about that, I said instead. Can't you talk to him? Tell him to stop wasting money. Please, Mary, Brian pleaded. I'm not good at tough conversations. Can't you handle it? I was stunned. Jim doesn't listen to me. He sees me as nothing but a housekeeper. You're his father, you should talk to him. But Brian kept pushing. Don't be so cold. Please just do this for me. His insistence only made me more disappointed in him. The next day he pressed me again. Have you talked to Jim about the money yet? What did he say? When I told him I hadn't, his temper flared. What are you doing? You need to talk to Jim right away. Fed up with his nagging, I resolved to focus on gathering evidence of his affair. Once I had it, I would finally be free of both Brian and Jim. Reluctantly, I approached Jim. Your father is worried about your spending, I began carefully. He asked me to remind you to be more careful with money. I tried to sound non-confrontational, but Jim exploded. Who do you think you are, housekeeper? It's my money and I'll spend it however I want. It's none of your business. I could see why Brian had avoided the conversation. Jim was impossible to reason with. Still, I couldn't help but wish Brian would handle his own son. Jim glared at me with open hatred. I'll get you kicked out of this house. Just wait. His words stung, but I reminded myself that once I had proof of Brian's infidelity, I would leave on my own terms. A few days later, Emma called. Mom, we have the proof, she said firmly. Can you meet Jack and me at a local restaurant? My heart sank. Was it true? Did he really cheat on me? Emma's fury was evident. Yes. It's true. He's been seeing a woman much younger than you. They're even looking for a new house together. Jack handed me the investigation report, filled with undeniable evidence. Countless photos of Brian with his mistress. You need to divorce him right away, Jack advised. This woman seems suspicious. She's been spending extravagantly and may be seeing other men besides your husband. She could be planning to drain his money and leave him. Hearing this made me realize how deeply Brian had fallen for her schemes. They had already visited a wedding venue, and she might have taken money for preparations and a new home. Jack's words gave me a sense of urgency. I needed to act quickly. After discussing the next steps with Emma and Jack, I returned home, the investigation report in hand. When I arrived, I found Jim and Brian talking in the living room. Mary, come here. We need to talk, Brian said, his expression serious. I thought it was the perfect opportunity to confront him. Jim smirked as he glanced at me. You've been seeing a younger guy, haven't you? Dad saw you at a family restaurant with him today. He shoved a blurry photo in my face. Me sitting with Jack. Caught red-handed. How embarrassing, dating someone the same age as your daughter. Jim gloated. But I refused to let it shake me. That's Emma's fiancé and she was with us at the restaurant, I said calmly. Brian, however, wouldn't listen. Jim caught you in the act. You've been cheating on me, haven't you? Dad, kick her out. Let us live together again like before, Jim urged. I agree with Jim, Brian said arrogantly. Leave this house, Mary. We'll deal with the divorce and money later. I could hardly believe his audacity. I almost laughed at how clueless he was. All right, I said coolly. I'll leave. We can discuss the divorce and financial matters later. As I walked toward the door, Jim shouted after me. Make us dinner before you go. I'm hungry. Even at that moment, all he cared about was food. I ignored him and left the house, the investigation report tucked safely in my bag. I went straight to Emma's house and told her and Jack everything. I can't believe they mocked you over me, Jack said, shaking his head. Their minds are delusional. I knew then I had made the right choice by leaving. Emma and Jack promised to help me with the divorce proceedings. Still, I asked nervously, are you sure you'll be okay with me living with you after you're married? Of course, Mom. We want you to live with us, Emma reassured me. 3 weeks passed before Brian finally contacted me. Let's meet and discuss things at the house. Bring the divorce papers, he said. On the day of the meeting, I arrived with Emma, Jack, and our lawyer. Brian's face paled when he saw us. Why didn't you come alone? He stammered. You never said I had to, I replied. The house was already filthy, even after just 3 weeks without me. Brian sneered. Even with all these people, you'll still pay alimony. I laughed. I've done nothing wrong here. Sign these. I handed him the divorce papers. Brian froze when he read the documents. Why am I paying alimony? You're the one who cheated, he protested, shoving the blurry photo at us again. Our lawyer calmly handed him the investigator's report. We have proof of your affair, he said firmly. Brian's face turned ashen as he flipped through the evidence. Jim too was speechless. I can't pay alimony. I'm broke, Brian admitted weakly. I borrowed money for the wedding and honeymoon. At that, Jim's true motives spilled out. You're not remarrying, are you? I don't want to lose half of your inheritance. Brian looked defeated. I've already spent all of Mom's inheritance, he confessed. Jim collapsed into a chair, disbelief written all over his face. Dad, can't you lend me some money? You've got some left, right? But Brian begged his son instead. Jim, please help me out. I've got nothing. I couldn't resist reminding them both. Jim, I found debt collection notices in your room. At your age, asking your mom to clean your room is just embarrassing. Our lawyer presented the alimony documents, and Brian reluctantly signed them. Jack added sharply, I heard your mistress is spending your money on other men too. Brian turned white as a sheet. Frantically, he tried to call her, but she didn't answer. Mary, I'm sorry. Don't leave us, Jim begged. Dad's never home and I'm tired of eating junk food. I shook my head. Ask your father's new wife. You'll have a young housekeeper soon enough. And with that, we left them behind and headed straight to City Hall to file for divorce. Afterward, I moved in with Emma and Jack. It was a little cramped, but we were already planning to move into a bigger place. A few weeks later, I heard that Brian's mistress had scammed him. She had taken a large sum of money for a wedding that would never happen, leaving him with nothing but debt. Then Jim called me begging for help. Mom, Dad moved out and I have nowhere to go. I'm not your mother, I reminded him coldly. We're not related and I've divorced your father. Eventually, Jack threatened to report Jim to the police if he kept harassing me. That finally scared him off. Life with Emma and Jack was peaceful. Soon we received wonderful news. Emma was pregnant. I was overjoyed to become a grandmother and focused on preparing for her wedding and our growing family. For the first time in years, life was finally looking up, and I was determined to cherish every moment with my loved ones.